In this video, we're going to take a look at the DSUM function. It's one of the database functions. They all start with the letter D. And in order to do that, we need some data to play with. So we're going to go to Excel Help, and we're going to type in DSUM as what we want to search for. We're going to click on the search button, and we get a couple of things here, and I know that the one I want is the database functions reference. And it comes up with a list of the functions in alphabetical order, and we want DSUM. And it takes us to this page where we get at the top we get a description, and at the bottom we get an example, and there's some sample data here, and we can just grab that. We don't have to type it in ourselves. So if I select that data and do a Control-C, it appears that this is one place where you can't right click and choose copy, and then go over here and do a Control-V and paste it in. We get the data, and there appears to be a little bit of a problem with the data. The problem is that there's an equal sign on the beginning here, and we can go in and easily fix that, and now we're good. Now when we're doing the D functions, the database functions, we need a database or a table, and so here is the table that we're going to be pulling our data from. And just to make it look a little more like a table, I'm going to go here and just format the headings. You have to have column headings when you do this stuff. So there we go. So now it looks a little more like a table. And this stuff up here is what's called the criteria range, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. If you know how to do advanced filters, this is the criteria range from an advanced filter. Now, before we actually look at the DSUM function, we're going to look at another function first. We're going to look at the ordinary sum function. And let's say that I just want to know what my total profit was. Okay. I should always label what you put in here. So let's label that. And then in this cell, what I want to do is I just want to sum the profit. Okay. So I can go to my Home tab and go to the Auto Sum button over here on the right and click on Sum. And it automatically looks for the nearest group of numbers if it can find one, and it assumes I want to sum all these numbers here, which is correct, although I don't really want those blanks down below. So just take the mouse and drag it over the numbers and verify the dancing lines around the numbers that you want, and if it is, the range down here should say E6 to E11, and then hit the enter key, and it will give me the total profit for all of my trees. Okay. Now sometimes you might not want that much information. You might want something a little more specific. You might want the profit for your apple trees. And if we highlight the apple trees here, we see that it's 105 plus 75 is 180, and 45 is 225. Okay, so the sum of my apple trees is 225, which isn't all that hard to do if you've only got 6 rows of data here, but if you had lots of rows of data, it'd be a little bit of work. So here's what we want to do. We want to tell Excel to look at all of this data here and add up the numbers in this column if the word apple is over here in this column. And that's what the criteria range is for up here. This is where we tell it what the rule is for deciding which rows to pick out in the table to do some arithmetic on. So let's put a little label down here that says total. Let's try that again. Total profit, yeah. For apple trees, and again that gets left aligned by default because it's text, so we'll right align it. And then what I want to do here is I want to put in my formula, and my formulas, my functions are up here on the Formulas tab, and this is a database function. That's the category that Excel uses for these functions. And if you look, you can look all over formulas here and you don't see any database functions, but you can still find them by going to the Insert Function button over here. And when it says Select a Category, click on the down arrow and choose Database. And you'll get a list of a handful of functions here that all start with the letter D followed by the name of another existing function. Okay, so there's an average and a D average, there's a count and a D count, and so on. And if you scroll down to the bottom here, there is a sum and a DSUM. We know how sum works. Now we're going to do the DSUM. So select DSUM, click on OK. and it wants to know where the database is. Well, the database is over here, and this is one place where you have to include the headings because it needs to know what the column numbers or what the column names are. And I got to tell it which column is it that I want to sum. Well, I want to sum the profit column or the fifth column of the table, and I can actually do either one. I can put the number 5 in there, or I can put the word profit, and I'll do number 5 this time. And then it wants to know where my criteria range is, and the criteria is where you put the rule. And for more information about this, look at the video on advanced filters. But this is our criteria range in this case. And all I'm saying here is look in the tree column, and if the word apple is there, I want you to select that and use that in computing the average. If the word apple is not there, do not select that row and do not use that in computing the average. And if I do that, I get $225. And a quick way to just kind of verify here and make sure that you're doing this right is find the numbers here for apple and do a non-adjacent selection. Click on the first one, then control click on the other two. And whenever you select any data, Excel always does this for you down here in the lower right hand corner. It always gives you the average, the count, and the sum is 225. So it is doing it correctly. A couple of other things I'd like to show you here. Let's delete this function and try it again. Again, go to Insert Function and scroll down to DSUM and click on OK. And for the database, let's select this again. And for the field this time, I'm going to type the word profit. And notice I didn't capitalize. It doesn't matter if it's if the case matches or not. But what does matter is if when you move out of the field, you need to put quotation marks around it. And select our criteria here. And Excel will put the quotation marks in for you if you use the function arguments dialog box. So you don't really need to worry about it. Click on OK. And it does exactly what it did before. The only difference is we have profit here instead of number 5. And that number 5, by the way, came from the column in the table. If I were to take this table and move it over somewhere, profit would still be column 5. It's column 5 of the table. It's not column 5 of the spreadsheet. Okay. So that also works. Now, if you type this in, once you get used to using the functions, it's faster just to type them in than to use the function arguments dialog box. If I do that and I hit enter, I get this error message here that says name, and you will always get that if you have the name of something that Excel doesn't recognize here, if you have a word that Excel doesn't recognize. And basically when it sees text like this that does not have quotation marks around it, it assumes that it must be the name of a function, or possibly it's the beginning of a range, like A10, and you type the A but you didn't type the 10. And so it doesn't know what that name refers to. So that's what the error message is for. And I can do a Control Z here, put the quotation marks back in, and I'm good to go. Okay, one last thing I want to show you. We'll delete this one more time. And that is before you start, and this is helpful especially if you've got a big table that you'd have to scroll a lot to select. You can go up here to the name box and you can name that. So I'm just going to call that table. You can call it anything you want to. Don't put spaces in the name. There are some syntax rules, but the easy way to remember the rule is just use letters for the name and run them together. You can also put digits in there as well, but it shouldn't start with a digit. So I'm going to hit the enter key and we're going to call that table. And notice anytime now that I drag the mouse over that, the word table appears up here. So I can refer to it by name instead of by the actual corners of the range. So if I give it a name and I go back down here and we try one more time to do our insert function, and we choose DSUM, click on OK, and our database, this time we can type in the name, and this is not case sensitive either. You can type in table, and field number 5, criteria is up here, and hit the enter key, and it gives us a value of 225. Because I've got some other criteria up here from the example, we'll actually try 2 more with this data up here. Let's do apple trees that are more than 10 feet tall and less than 16 feet tall. And I won't bother to put a label this time. We'll just go in and we'll do the function. So let's go down here to DSUM and click on OK, and the database is table, and the field is column 5 again, and this time we're going to do all of the apple tree rules here. And if I look at my apple trees here, and I go over here and look at the height, this one is too tall. It's not less than 16. This one is not greater than 10, so I'm really only picking one apple tree here, and the sum of that is profit is $75 for that. When you have same rules on the same line like this, it's as if they were connected by the word and all of them must be true in order to select the data. If they're on separate rows, each row is assumed to be connected by the word or. So if I select both of these rows here, and obviously when I do this I also have to select the column headings, but if I select both of these rows here, then I'm going to get either apple trees that are between 10 and 16 feet tall, or all of my pear trees. There are no other criteria here for the pear trees, so if it says pear over here, I'm going to get it. So basically this rule then is going to give me one apple tree, and there are 2 pear trees in the data, so it's going to give me the sum of that one apple tree and the 2 pear trees. So let's go down here and try that one. So let's do DSUM again, click on OK, and the database is table, and the field is 5, and the criteria is all of this stuff up here. Hit the enter key, and it should tell me that the sum of my pear trees and that one apple tree and the other pear tree is $248, and that's exactly what I get. So that's how the DSUM function works in Excel 2013.